As we wind up this year and start looking forward to next year, it's time to really start setting our big goals. And to help us with that, not only setting the goals, but making sure they become reality, today we have Gregg Brown. Let's not wait till January 1st. Let's get going right now. Hi, I'm Chris Reynolds, and I'm on a mission to help independent financial advisors build a better business through a remarkable client experience. In this podcast, you're going to learn how to do that from my conversations with the visionaries, the leaders, the independent advisors who are reshaping the future of the financial advice industry. At the end of each episode, you're going to walk away with an actionable idea that you can take and use right now, and it will help you to build a better business today. This is Turning the Page. It's crazy to think that we're already talking about 2025, how time flies, but here we are. And as a start, as we wrap up this year and we go into the holiday season, I think it's a good idea that we look back over this last year, see what we accomplished or what we didn't accomplish, and start to think about what the new year should look like. I think that as entrepreneurs, we like to dream big and we like to plan big. Everyone I talk to, and I'm talking to a lot of people this time of year, and they're all talking to me about their big vision and their big quest and what's going to change next year. But how do you actually take action on those big ideas? Like, that's the secret. Anyone can have big ideas, but it's actually taking action. How can we get out of our own way and not just say next year is going to be the best, but actually make it our best? And today's guest is very special, where we have somebody that is going to help us set the table for the new year and help us show us the way. And he's accomplished some amazing thing in his own life, and he knows how to make things happen. So today we have Gregg Brown. And who's Gregg Brown? Well, he's a globally recognized change and future of work expert. He's also the best-selling author who combines storytelling, audience engagement, and a lot of research-based insights to empower teams to thrive in the future of work. So what has he done? Well, Gregg has recently been named, the top 50 global thought leaders on change management. His insights on change and the future of work are in Forbes, they're in Newsweek, they're in Rolling Stones, which I love Rolling Stones, and in Entrepreneur Magazine. He's been on Global News and CTV. He's been on CTV's The Social. He's dynamic. He has high energy keynotes. He's engaged thousands of individuals. And now he has a new book, Spark Action, How to Lead Change That Matters. And it's Amazon's #1 best-selling, recommended as one of the top thought leader books to read in 2024 by Think 360. Another interesting fact was, Gregg was actually part of the groundbreaking team that opened one of the first waves of Starbucks. And everyone knows how much I like Starbucks. In fact, if you go back to my podcast of number 41, I talk about the business model, and he has a Starbucks right in his hand. Mm-hmm. So, Gregg, it's such an honor. Thank you, and welcome to Turning the Page.
Thank you so much for having me, Chris.
This is great. So why don't we start with the beginning? As I start with everybody, tell us your story, Gregg. How did you get here?
So I'm going to try to keep it short. So I started as an entrepreneur many, many years ago because I wanted to make money. And so I started to do garage sales when I was like 5 or 6 and sell lemonade.
No, that's a start, 5 or 6.
Oh, yeah. And I was, and then by the time I was 10 or 11, back in those days, we had paper routes, and I was like dishing out the cash and making the cash, which was really, really great. And I also had this other side of myself, though, was I really loved teaching people things. I was a camp counselor, I taught people canoeing, and all through high school, I did all of that. And I thought I was going to be a teacher when I graduated. And I realized, though, I was mature enough at that moment to realize I didn't want 9 months of behavior challenges with kids.
I can see that.
So I ended up at Starbucks after floundering through a bunch of roles, as a server and a waiter and all those sorts of things. And that's where I really got we called it back then the training sort of bug. They really thought I could do well opening new stores, and I started to take that role on and started to really get into talent development and training. And here I am all these years later, still sort of doing teaching, but on a keynote and workshop stage instead.
Oh, fantastic. And again, this is following your passion. We talk about this on the podcast all the time. Like, it takes a while sometimes for people to figure out what they really want to do. But once they figure it out, it's, the old expression, you don't work a day in your life if you love what you do.
Well, one of the things I tell entrepreneurs and anyone actually who's looking for work or to shift their work is I say, go back and look at what you did as a kid and what you enjoyed.
Hmm.
I loved as a kid, for example, real estate. I used to build houses out of Lego. So in my adult life, I bought and sold a bunch of real estate, which is also actually another interesting point how I got here. Because after I sold some property, I made quite a bit of money, and I went to a financial advisor at a bank
Hmm.
and gave them a big wad of cash, promptly, which I lost $90,000 that first year.
Hmm.
And what happened was, Chris, and I think you'll appreciate this, was I believe as entrepreneurs or anyone, we need to look for people that are better than us at certain things.
Right, right.
And I asked three of my friends who were, I felt, very wealthy, and I said, who are your financial advisors? Who are they? And one of them, who was also my realtor, Kathy, she said, well, I use Bill Black at Investment Planning Council. I'll talk to him. And what's so interesting is y'all didn't know that when you booked me for
We did
this.
not. I found out 5 minutes before the show.
I know. I talked to Bill, this is many years ago, and I didn't have quite the amount of wealth he needed at the time to take me on. But he said, Joe, I'm going to bundle you in because you're a good person as a family member. And ever since then, I mean, they've been IPC's managed my stuff for me.
I
And
love it.
there's a good, and the thing is with entrepreneurs, we have to look for, and for anyone, who are the people smarter than us? I don't know anything about money.
Right.
I know I want money to come in and I want to leave. Some and I want money to come out. I don't care about all the other stuff. So entrepreneurs need to find people that know things that they don't and use them.
Well, I think that is a valuable lesson. Well, first of all, for those who don't know, Bill actually did one of my podcasts very early. I forget which one. I'm going to say it's in the first 10. So he was early in it, all about dealing with people who have come into money and such. But I think you also make a really, really good point. Is entrepreneurs also need to stay focused. So it's better to have other
Yes.
people around you who really know what they're doing, so that you can focus on the things that you do best and not trying to be an expert. And by the way, finance is one of those things, when you screw it up, it really hurts. Like, it's not like some of the
Oh,
things where you screw
yeah.
up, it's not, but $90,000, that's a really hurt moment.
Well, and giving your money to someone who's making $50,000 a year to manage a bigger budget than that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And, part of our work, I think, as leaders, entrepreneurs, whatever job title want to give themselves, is to realize, what don't I know? And who out there is better at that than I am? And let me go ask them for how, or who they can help me connect with or something, because we can't be good at everything.
No, in fact, as they say, and you probably studied this in some of the work that you've done, you're probably better not to be good at a whole bunch of things, but to be really good at one thing. And I know one of the expressions that I've used on this podcast that actually people have come back to me on is, every time you do something you hate, you deprive somebody else of doing something they love. And since I hate a lot of
Absolutely.
things, I tend to be a delegator.
Well, me too. And I think we realize that, 10% of our work we're not going to like, even when we have our own business. You're like, I do not like taxes and money stuff, even though I love money. So, I have a good accountant that works with Carla Black and Bill, and to make sure that, and the only thing I need to know is, do I have enough? That's all I need to know. I don't care
Right.
about ROI growth. I don't know what it means.
Right. Do I have enough? It's the most important question any of us can ask.
Absolutely.
Now, when you're an entrepreneur, and especially around this time of year, right? So this is the time of year you're winding up the old year, you look into the new year, and you set these big, ambitious goals for yourself, for your business. But sometimes people fall short. Maybe you talk about, why does that happen? Why do people fall short of their goals? What gets in their way? And is it them that gets into their own way?
Well, we all know New Year's resolutions don't work.
Right.
They just plain don't. Setting a goal is not enough. And I think what happens is this: we develop these goals, which I think it's good to have goals. I'm not saying don't have goals. Sometimes there's a few things we do. One is we set them that are too far out of reach. So, for example, when I work with new entrepreneurs, if they're making $30,000 a year and they say to me, well, I want to make $200,000 a year. I'm like, so do you really see yourself making 200 next year? Or is that too much of a stretch? I'm like, let's bring it down to one. And we go
Right.
down until it's realistic, but a bit of a stretch goal, because you
Right.
have to be able to see yourself accomplishing it. And then the biggest piece is you have to crush the complexity of a goal with simplicity. You
I love
have to
it.
break it down to small, simple, manageable steps that you see. Visualizing and seeing yourself accomplish your goals, great. What's more important is visualizing and setting pieces in place for you to accomplish the steps on the way there. That's the
Right.
most important piece.
So the tactics, measuring those quick tactics. As I was watching one of your videos, great videos by the way, and
Oh,
everyone should go to
thank
your
you.
website and watch them. But
Thank
one of them
you.
was talking about small steps versus quick change. People try to
Yeah,
make these huge big changes to their businesses, and fall short, and then stop altogether. Where you advocate, and I really love it. Small little steps that gradually get you to where you want to go. So maybe elaborate a little bit about that.
for sure. Like, I think some of the pieces around this are, I worked in a hospital many years ago, and you know, the physicians and I would often be talking, why don't people just quit smoking? I show them the dirty lungs, I show them the cancer, I show them this. And as we're all in the smoking area taking a big drag of our cigarettes, I'm usually saying something like, in order for the change to start with people, it's not enough to have the picture and the goal. There has to be a bit of dissatisfaction with the way things are now. We have to be able to see ourselves accomplishing it. There needs to be supports in place to get there.
Right.
And this is the biggest, I think, part for us to create change. All of that has to be bigger than the risks of staying the same. If it feels easier for me to stay the way I am, I will.
Right. So, in other words, the goal has to be worth the effort that it takes to get there. If you can't
Absolutely.
visualize that, that's going to be difficult.
Well, and I think the piece is this, is that we tend, the bigger the goal, the harder it might be to achieve. And that's why you have to set sort of smaller goals to get there that have tactics under them. It's great to say, oh, I'm going to get my doctor. I'm just in the process of applying for a PhD program for some loony reason. I don't know why I'm going back to school. But I sort of was interested in, artificial intelligence and how leadership's evolving with it and so on. And it's great. I can see myself doing this and completing it in 4 or 5 years. But what's more important is I need to see myself complete the first course. I need to
Right.
see myself complete the second course. Like, you got to chunk it down. And I think that that's the biggest thing. And our brain gets in our way. It talks ourselves out of things all the time.
Well, maybe you could expand upon that, because there's a
Sure.
whole area there about the science of how the brain works and how it works
Yeah,
for
yeah,
you and against you, and
for
how
sure.
you sort of help people use it to their advantage.
For sure. So there's two pieces about that. One is our brains talk us out of doing things all the time. So whether I'm doing work with entrepreneurs or, I used to do career counseling with people when I was younger or with kids, this is what it looks like. And I'm sure everybody's listening been there. I've been there. We're like, yeah, I really want to apply for this job. Oh, but I don't have all the qualifications. Oh, but it would be really good. Oh, but I'm not sure if I should. Well, let me try. But oh, what if they offer it to me? Oh my gosh, what? you know, you can say no if they offer it to you. We all have a
Right.
choice. So we go down this sort of what I call the crazy train. That's just this brain thing. Now, what that is it's doing creative thinking, which is idea generation. I'd really like to do this. I'd really like to do this. And it's doing critical thinking at the same time. No, you can't. No, you're not. And it's like, and Chris, I know you've probably been in meetings like this, not at IPC, of course, but maybe other places where you've worked. um, where you're in the meeting and people are like, how should we solve this? And people bring up, oh, Chris, I think we should do this. I'm like, no, that's not going to work here. I've been here 11 years. Well, what about this? Well, I think we should just, well, no, I like
Right.
this over here. And ideas get shot up and put down. And then after an hour, you have to have another meeting because you'll have nothing happen the last meeting. Because, and the truth is this, no one brings ideas to meetings that are fully formed.
Right.
So we need to allow ideas to collide. We need to we need people to help us, because I can talk myself out of stuff. We need people to create the space for us for 2 to 3 minutes just to explore the idea it will determine which parts to take action on. And that's really the first part, because people will set these goals and talk themselves out of them, and it just doesn't, you know, it's just not a useful way to be. So I think that's sort of the first part.
Yeah.
And I think the second piece about that is our brain is designed to protect us, with that good old flight, or freeze piece.
Right.
And, it wants to talk us out of doing things. And when we get stuck with, probably, have you ever bought a new car, Chris, and you've got in the car and you're driving around going, oh, look, my car's over there. Oh my gosh, my car's over there.
All of a sudden, everybody drives an Audi. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not that everybody's driving an Audi. It's that you have triggered your brain to notice what's already there.
Right.
And when we're in the workplace and when we're in our job for a period of time, we end up very narrow focused. We don't see what's there. So what we need to do is help ourselves and our teams trigger our brains to notice what's there. And so what happens is the language we use can tell us what's there or not. So if I say to myself, I don't know what to do here, Chris, I can't figure this out, I don't know what's going on, I'm going to get more ideas of how not to figure it out.
Right.
Versus if you shift your language and say, you know what, I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to figure this out. I guarantee in 2 minutes, you'll get ideas to figure it out. But it's hard to remember that when you're under pressure of not figuring it out.
I think those are very, very important lessons. And by the way, it is IPC. And it's like every company that I've ever worked with, every small company I ever worked with, every entrepreneur, you always give them a suggestion, you should do this, or thought about do that. And then there's like 100 reasons why that will never work. My client, and here's one of the famous ones you hear, my clients don't do, like, you should do a communication to your clients. Oh, my clients don't read. I'm like, oh, you have a whole bunch of clients that don't read now. It's interesting how quickly they come up with these blockers of how not to progress the business. So you've just explained why some of that happens.
Well, and it's, and you've had such a good point, where stuff like, well, that's not going to work here in Ontario because it's in the US. I'm like, there's not much net new on the planet. Maybe 10% of that idea will work here.
Right.
The newsletter you do doesn't need to look like the newsletter here, so make it your own.
Right. Like, and that, as my position is really talking people into things. Right? That's it, because it's so easy to talk yourself out of things, because inaction is probably safer, right? And to your point, that whole, your brain's trying to protect you. So they're like, oh, don't put yourself out there. That, you start doing that and it doesn't work. That might reflect badly on me. So I'm glad you put that into context.
Well, it's about, and you hit a really good point, which is not putting yourself out there. Because with AI coming in rapidly to every industry, and every financial advisor is going to be using it if they haven't used it already, whether it's organization-wide or individual. And what we're seeing in the research and in practice is, as things become more automated, you have to ramp up your leadership skills. You have to ramp up your people skills. You have to ramp up your customer engagement skills and not rely on AI to engage your customers.
Well, I think you made the perfect point. Is at the end of the day, people always ask me, oh, I'm going to be replaced by an algorithm, or they're going to go online, or going to do this. No, you know what? Everybody wants a person. I want a person. I don't want to go online and do this. Maybe it's, my age, maybe it's a lot of things, but I like to look somebody in the eye and say, hey, what about this? And to your point, finances is one of those areas where I need a person. I need somebody that holds me accountable and that I hold accountable. It's a relationship type business.
Well, and tools will never, ever, ever replace wisdom. Tools will never replace wisdom. You still, I was at my physician's office for the yearly checkup, and now they're recording everything, and it's creating the medical notes and medical records and all that stuff, and it's saving him 2 hours a day, he told me, so he can see patients. Yeah, it's huge. That's huge. And meetings are going to be started done more like that in people's offices if they're not. But he still has to read through and make sure that the recommendations are correct, because tools will not replace wisdom. What's going to happen is, even for admin professionals and so on, their ability to think strategically, to edit, to critically think, all of those are going to be more escalated.
Yeah, no, I could not agree more. So now I got my big goal. I'm going down the path. What keeps me on the path? What make sure, because this is what now everybody's thinking right now is, okay, I've had these big goals in the past. What's going to keep me on track this way? Any advice?
Yeah. Get a group of people around you to support you. So what that means is it doesn't need to be a formal culture mentor. I mean, I mentor in some volunteer programs, new entrepreneurs, and the biggest value they get is once a month we sit down and see where you're at, what you need to do next. But when you're someone like me who's been around, for a while and I've had my own business for a while, what really keeps me going is a collective group of either colleagues, peers. I believe in getting mentors that are younger than you. I have mentors that are 23, 24.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, because they know stuff I don't know.
I was going to say a new way to look at everything.
And I think that that is what's really important to keep you on track. I think you can also use AI to help you, help it create a spreadsheet, help, goal tracking. Use those sorts of things to keep yourself on track. And the challenge as an entrepreneur, I don't do monthly reports. When I worked in an organization, I was resentful of doing my yearly, all that reporting. And you know what the downside is? You don't see how much you've done.
Right. You don't see and it's harder to have cause and effect when you don't measure things.
Well, and this is, really key point. People think that, you need to be confident to step into the future, be confident to be successful. And yet what we know is the absolute opposite is the reverse, which is you need to look at your past successes, which will help you develop confidence. Confidence doesn't magically appear from, the air.
Right.
If you have to measure backwards to step into the future confidently. And it's been a real key practice I've reminded entrepreneurs to keep doing. And the success doesn't need to be numbers. It can be, Chris said my podcast was really good, or Chris really liked the way I filled out this spreadsheet. Like, that's a success. It doesn't need to be I made $1 million this year.
Well, I think that you're at a good point. We had a few podcasts I can think of. We had somebody with 40X, which is the 4 disciplines of execution, and they talked about the flywheel. Small wins equal another win, which equals another win, and that flywheel keeps moving up. It was also, a whole group of work in good to great. But the opposite is effect. Bad news equals more bad news. It equals more bad news. So it's how you talk to yourself and what you celebrate and what you focus on is going to dictate your future.
When you really just need to do, when I started mentoring new entrepreneurs, most of them had full-time jobs. And, the way I ended up with my business was I just did one thing every day that was moving my business forward before I even had it. So it could be something as small as I'm going to research this. I'm going to take action on this. I'm going to reach out. As long as you do one thing every day, it sounds so simple, yet people find excuses not to do it. If you do one little thing every single day, it can set you up for success in the future. It sounds trite, but in my experience with hundreds of people, including myself, it's true.
Well, I'm not sure if you saw the documentary with Arnold Schwarzenegger, and I was fascinated by that, but you should see it because he talks about when he got into bodybuilding, he had this big wall in this little basement gym thing that he built, and he would write, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then when he hit 10, 9, 10, and then he would see how many sets he did. And it was from those little beginnings and those little wins and those little measurements. And of course, we know what happened with Arnold Schwarzenegger and what is it, 6 or 7 times Mr. Olympia type of thing, all from those little wins that he had. So,
absolutely.
As you're listening to this podcast, you're probably thinking about your own goals for next year. You're probably thinking about how am I going to accomplish them? What are my obstacles? And if you want to have a conversation about that, I'd love to have a virtual coffee with you. So if you want to do that, just go to the show notes, click on the link, and let's have a coffee together. We'd love to help you achieve your goals in this new year. Now, as we go through your material, you have some really cool material that entrepreneurs can utilize. I've heard of this one entrepreneur manifesto. Maybe talk about that. And what does that mean?
Sure. So yeah, whenever I'm doing presentations to entrepreneurs, I develop what I call my entrepreneur manifesto, which is basically just a brain dump of everything. And, 2 of the pieces that I think are really important for entrepreneurs to get is, 1, get out of that competitive mindset when you're goal setting. Right. It's not about competition, it's collaboration. two financial advisors could both work for the same organization, and I'm going to go with one because I like them and the other one doesn't fit me as well. Or I'm going to go to one because they have hair and one who doesn't have no hair. Who cares? Be yourself. So just be sure to get out of a competitive mindset and get into a collaborative mindset. And the second piece, which I think is super important as we step into the future, instead of sitting there from your point of view, going, what can I do? What can I do next year? What are going to be my goals? What's it going to look like? What should I grow my business? Do this instead. Take a step back and go, how can I help?
Right.
How can I help? How can I help my clients? How can I do this? How can I help my team? The answers that you generate from that will be the ones that are the most important goals that you'll be able to set for your company.
I think that's great advice. Where can I help? Where can I create value for my customers, for my employees, for everyone? If you just think about that all the way around, I think life becomes a whole lot better.
Absolutely.
Now, one of the things we started with, and I love this, you were part of the first wave of Starbucks in Canada. And again, I've done a podcast. Number 41 was all about Pike's Place and, building that template and building it. So maybe, what are some of the experiences you took out of it that entrepreneurs could learn from and sort of replicate in the future?
Well, I think one thing was Barb Reed, who was the woman who came up from the US to open the first, probably 20, 30 stores up here in Canada. It took, about 3 or 4 years to do 20, 30 stores, just so you know.
Right. It wasn't easy.
And remember back then, there were no coffee. There wasn't a coffee culture. People went to Dunkin' Donuts and there was I think there was maybe a coffee store somewhere, but it wasn't the culture like we have. And she said, let the customer ask for extra milk. Let them have it in a tall cup, a small cup, a big cup of this. Let them use the washroom. Let them use the phone. The customer wasn't always right, but giving them the perception that we could do whatever they wanted was very, very key within their mandate. We're not giving stuff away for free. So that was really, really key. And the other biggest thing was we hired for how they interacted with people.
I love that.
That was the number one. Everything else could be trained. Now, of course, some things you need certifications in, as you know, in your world isn't the same in mine. And yet, as we know with the future of work changing and AI coming in, what we're seeing is, for example, RBC's lowered, you don't have to have a 4-year college degree or university degree anymore for certain roles. We're starting to see the shift and change as workers' expectations changes, as the talent shortage increases. So all this stuff we talked about 30 years ago is sort of coming back in around that. And I think that that's a real key piece for us.
No, I love it. Now you have you have your new book out, Spark Action: How to Lead Change That Matters.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about it. As I said, I've gone through it. It's great. I certainly would recommend it, but why did you write it and what would people expect from reading it?
Well, I've worked with entrepreneurs and leaders and organizations for years, big Fortune 500, people, in big like Habitat for Humanity, UN, NATO, biggies. And one of the things I've heard, regardless of what role people are in, is this, and you may have said it, I've said it, which is I need to sell people on my idea. I need to convince them to get on board.
Exactly. Constantly, by the way. Yeah.
Yeah. And yet good salespeople know this. Selling is not about convincing.
Right.
Selling is about creating a dialogue. And the book is really about how to get out of that mindset. I got to sell and convince. And how do I create a dialogue with people so that they can say yes? Because the change happens in the mind of the other person, the buy-in, the sales, all about the other person. And what do they need to be, do, know, or have to say yes? And I think as entrepreneurs, what that looks like is, I had a financial person years ago who, would sit down with me and go, well, there's a 10% return on this and an 8% return on this and the ROI and all this accounting language. I don't even know what it means. I truthfully don't know what it means. And I don't want to know. It's not my expertise. I don't care as long as I make money. Right. It's your job to know what all that is. And I would say and I'm not with them obviously anymore, and this is where Carla and Bill are so good, is they translate their language so I can understand it.
Right.
And it's a
Right. That's good
translation.
dialogue. Right.
Doctors need to translate. You know, accountants need to translate. Financial people need to translate that. So that's one thing that, you know, that translation. The other thing I really have picked up over the years, not from Starbucks, from other people, is, you know, our goal in our work to get people to buy, whatever that is to remove the fear from the client. It doesn't matter what you're selling. It's all about fear removal. So when
Right.
people hire me, for example, they want to make sure I'm going to be good in front of people. I'm not going to say bad things. They want to make sure that they're going to incorporate, you know, the organization's DNA, you know, all that sort of stuff. So my goal is fear removal, fear removal.
Right.
And it's the same for financial advisors, entrepreneurs. You want to get into your customer's head and go, what would they be afraid? Why would they be afraid of working with me?
Right.
And what do I need to do to acknowledge that or remove that?
I like it. And what you're saying is absolutely, true is how do you get them to focus on the right thing? How do you have the right dialogue? Like that's the engagement.
Yeah.
What I've seen before, what was the saying? A good close is simply a logical conclusion to a good dialogue, right? So,
And not everybody's a good close. You know, one of the things I've had above my desk for years, even when I worked with organizations, was I only work with people I like to have dinner with. Now, I
I
can
like
tell
that.
you, I haven't had dinner with most of my clients,
Right.
truthfully.
Right.
But if whether it's a podcast interview, whether it's something I'm paid to do, if I can't see us sitting down and going, I could break bread with this person. I will not do business with you. I will not do a podcast. I will not write an article. I will not show up on stage. I will say no because there's something that doesn't align with, and I don't know what it is. I don't really care. It just doesn't fit. And I think entrepreneurs can get into a scary place. And this is for any financial advisor. Like, I need to get clients. I need to make money.
Right.
Get out of that.
Right.
Who's your client? Who's your ideal client? What does it look like? Who do I want to work with? Because life's short.
Absolutely. And what I refer to as your raving fans. You love them and they love you. And if you just had those people to deal with all day long, life would be a glorious, glorious thing. It's all
And
the other people that cause the problems.
totally, like I never see myself not working.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I don't work really, I sort of work full time, but I pick and choose. And, you know, I will always work because I love what I do. And I love the people I work with because retirement is this freedom of money, freedom of relationship. It's freedom of work, meaning you can pick and choose all of this, and freedom of something else, like personal time.
Right.
And I have that as an entrepreneur, so why would I ever stop that?
Well, this sort of flows into my sort of last question before I get on the rapid fire is, so what's next for you? You've written a book, you've been a great speaker, you've been, acclaimed, you're number one on the
Yeah,
Amazon list.
I've
What's
done a
next?
lot. You know, I'm sort of bored, even though I love my work, and I'm trying to challenge myself. And the whole evolution of leadership with AI coming in's really interested me. So I've applied to a doctoral program to do my doctorate on that topic. So I'm waiting to see if I get accepted. So my fingers are crossed. If I get accepted, I'll start end of February and do that in addition to my work. I just feel I need something. I feel like I need new research, new thinking to bring to my clients in addition to some of the recent research that I've been a part of.
All right. Well, I wish you luck, and I'm sure the audience wishes you luck in that endeavor. So now I do what I call my 3 rapid fire questions. So I'm going to ask you 3 questions and whatever pops in your mind. And although, generally after an interview, I usually know the answer to the first question, but what are you truly passionate about? What really drives you?
What really drives me is we spend most of our time at work. Let's have a good time at it.
I like it. Have fun. What is the greatest or most memorable client interaction that you can think of?
You know what? It was sort of positive, but it wasn't. It was a client many years ago. I was working with an organization and something bad had happened with some facilitators that had been working in there who reported into me. And I sat down with the client afterwards and said, well, let's do this, 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 and this. And we had a very good relationship. And I asked her afterwards, I said, why were you providing such a good referral to me to another client? And she said to me this, which is a piece of wisdom I've shared for years and is important to me. She said, Greg, I don't care how we work together when things are good. I want to know, how do we work together when things go bad? And you handled it perfectly.
That is a very memorable, and actually might have flow into, my last question always to everybody is, because I'm always interested in this, what's the best piece of advice you've ever received? Other than that one, because I think that one's
that was a really good piece of advice. I think the best piece of advice I ever received was when I was young. I came from a family, we lived in subsidized housing. We had no money. I was the kid who never went on the school trips. We had no money. And someone said to me, and I don't know who it was, they said, start to look at people who are more successful than you. Look for the habits that they do. Look for the things they do. And I read books, biographies and everything, stuff like, millionaires make their bed every day. So I started to make my bed every day. Things like, most people that, make a lot of money work out at a gym. So I started to work out at a gym. So I started to do, and these are little things.
Right.
And I started to take these little things and build and build and build and build. And that's been the biggest piece of advice, because it starts with your mindset, and I had to start to get into the mindset, whether I had the cash or not. And then start to take the actions from that. And that's, I still say that's a core piece of who I am, is always starting with your mindset. And what do I need to be to step into the future?
Well, it seems to me you've built an entire career off of that piece of advice. So I think you've done quite well. So, Gregg Brown, I'll give sort of my summary.
Please.
I think this has been great. It's all about, you set your goals, but also set your goals in a relation that you can actually achieve them. But little wins equals big wins. So, measure what's the next thing you have to do, as opposed to just focusing on major changes, because major changes seem to be intimidating to people, seem to, throw people off. Measure it, keep moving forward. And, it's about the spark, to your point, how do you spark action? This is your book. It's the whole premise of it. How to lead change that matters. Change is inevitable. You can lead it or you can follow it, but it comes down to people's mindset. And if you put a positive mindset in it and you're always striving to be better, you will be better. So Gregg Brown, author of Spark Action, How to Lead Change That Matters. Thank you very much for being on Turning the Page. Any final words for our audience?
I think the biggest thing is this. Any entrepreneur listening, do not connect with people on social media and pitch slap them. One of my friends calls it pitch slapping, where you connect and you say, hey, let's do this. I really want to sell you this. I'm like, do you already don't think I have a financial planner? So that is my last final word. Don't, when you're under pressure to sell, don't do the pitch slap. Make a relationship, build a relationship, and go from there.
Have that dialogue. Excellent, excellent. Thank you for those words of wisdom, and thank you very much for being on the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Chris.
Thanks for joining me on Turning the Page. What did you learn from today's episode? If you follow me on LinkedIn, please drop me a comment there. I'd love to chat with you about it over a virtual coffee. Send me a message on LinkedIn, or you can do so at our website. The link's in the show notes. I'm Chris Reynolds, and until next time.